dominated at this moment by new construction.
Just to note that homes is not included in this step.
Thank you, Lynn. That's really important. So homes, from a data space, is a separate set of data with different confidentiality rules. So I'm not showing you homes data, but there's an equivalent story with homes. It got off to a later start in our universe, but over the last 3 to 4 years, now we encounter, I think, 300 to 400 homes a day passing through our system. So that's a whole other story we can talk about. But again, it does extend all the way into the residential space. To get an idea about where we are in this market transformation process, one barometer is the percentage of essentially the Class A or B office space that is above 5,000 feet that's been built in the last 15 years. And we can see the kind of penetration that green building in the U.S. is having. And just to kind of scan your eyes down that number, our goal is to engage with the top 25% of the market, those market leaders, and to pull them to higher performance. And you can see that in some markets we're in the teens, and in many markets that are up and coming, we're in the single digits, but we're definitely on the map with regard to a significant percentage of new build stock in these marketplaces. So we can dive into any of these numbers, but my primary interest is to give you a snapshot of the market today and to take and motivate the idea that this is a market segment worth moving and that we have the potential to do that. So how are we moving it? Our current generation of tools engages across the idea of a site. It engages 5 different major issues: site planning, water, energy, which I'll dive into in a much more detail in a second, materials, and indoor environmental quality. Recognizing that a key value of green building in the conversation is that green building is about energy efficiency and renewable energy and so forth. It is also about a suite of other supportive issues that reflect the human experience: walkability, indoor environmental quality, indoor air quality, acoustics, thermal comfort, water conservation. So a key difference is that green building is energy efficiency plus a lot of other issues. And the way that we understand those priorities is through a prioritized set of impact categories. Basically, we say that we identify 13 different issues, and I haven't listed them all here, but you get an idea. We care about, in our current generation of rating systems, we care about 13 different issues, and we assign them each a proportional level of importance. That dark blue one, which you see on your screen with 25%, that's the impact category we call greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And so 25% of points we allocate to a LEED scorecard are on that scorecard in proportion to their ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There's 12 other issues on there that are each assigned a relative importance. The bottom line is, when you see a LEED scorecard today, the points on that scorecard are put there in proportion to their ability to address critical environmental issues. And we're going to extend that paradigm in the years ahead. But so you see a simple scorecard. Behind that simple scorecard is an analytical framework which links those strategies directly to their benefits for taking on key issues, including greenhouse gas emissions, water conservation, and human health. So just to reinforce, we apply that framework across a range of scales. So today, we are actively working at the neighborhood scale. That's tens to hundreds, in some cases thousands of acres, and we're dealing with decisions about planning, programming, infrastructure, and so forth. We apply that into new construction. Then we apply it into existing buildings. Again, in each domain, we're changing the decisions, and we apply it into commercial experience, interiors, and even homes. So what do we know about those buildings that we're working with from an energy perspective right now? Here's a snapshot. This is a snapshot of 2 different rating systems to give you an idea of what is being achieved. How are we moving that curve with regard to energy efficiency today? And I want to draw your eye to a distinction. On the left, we're looking at the snapshot in time during design. So we're talking about how the building is designed. And the reference case there is energy code. So ASHRAE standard 90.1. In this case, I've presented data where the buildings are compared to 2004. And the question is, how are we motivating projects to aspire to and achieve and document design that exceeds the requirements of energy code? And there's 2 things to notice. First off is that there's a distribution of achievement because we design in flexibility, because we understand that circumstances are different. But the most frequent level of achievement is about 30% better than ASHRAE 90.1 2004, and many projects achieve greater than 50%. Similarly, when we enter the operations phase, we're not using a code-based standard anymore. We use the Energy Star Portfolio Manager benchmark because we want to understand an asset in the context of all the other assets out there. So we switch to a different metric and we use the portfolio manager. And you can see that the average certified green building in our data set has an Energy Star score of 86. So what we do with a minimum, where 75 is qualifying for Energy Star. So we recognize the range of performance, and the critical issue is we choose the appropriate metric for that period in the life cycle of the built environment. And so I can drill into these numbers with you, and I'm going to show you some more ways to slice and dice this in a second. Okay, let's just give a couple of cases that really emphasize this notion of crossing scales, because one of the critical issues that we see in the green building industry is the ability to use information technology to drive across scales, and to, especially, the first example I will give you are situations where we have an institution. In this case, I'm going to give you an example of the Department of Health and Human Services. But think about any corporate institution, governmental institution, where that entity has set a goal, and we want to drive that goal through a hierarchy of decisions. And so in this case, the President has said through executive orders and with support from the Congress that we are going to achieve certain goals for energy efficiency, emissions reduction, and green building practice. He drives that goal through his Department of Health and Human Services, and one of its operating units is the National Institute of Health. In turn, NIH has to realize those requirements through the management of their facilities. First, at the national scale, they have 3 major facilities, Rocky Mountains and 2 on the East Coast. In turn, those responsibilities are brought down to the installation scale. In this case, a snapshot of the National Institute of Health campus in Bethesda, Maryland, where they're using a LEED for Existing Building framework to bring that, to take those mandates and push them into their buildings. So again, look at this confluence of scales. We've gone from an organizational mandate to a national view, down into an installation. We're then going to push that into the operation of a building and all the way into the interior spaces of that building. So the question is, how does information technology help us create this hierarchy of understanding so that we can roll up the performance from the interior to the building to the installation, roll down the mandate? One example another example of an organization doing this is the Park Service. The Park Service manages all 64,000 of its capital assets, including, I believe it's 12,000 buildings in this framework that I have on the screen now. So the Park Service is able to set national scenarios and model them out so that they can look at the implications of them at the portfolio level that are the responsibility of regional administrators, into individual operating units, and down to the individual building scale. The take home I want you to come away from this with is saying we see leading organizations standing up information systems that allow them to track across scales their goals for energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions, a whole range of things across a range of scales. And what they need are tools at each stage to say, what could I do? What will it do if I do it? And then to roll the benefits back up. What we're trying to do is show how green building as a process of both people, tools, and processes can support this hierarchy of needs that we believe these, although I'm illustrating it for agencies, I believe that it applies to any large entity, whether it's a company, a local government, or a federal agency. All right, so so with that preface, that's where we are right now. And the goal over the next few minutes is to think about how green building practice plays into that and demonstrate some tools. I want to come back to that curve and say, how do we find that curve using real data? How do we use the information in that curve to move that curve faster? And I'm going to posit to you in this context that that is an exercise that is driven by evidence. Evidence comes from volume of practice. If there is no volume, there is no evidence. And so that all those dots on that map are critical, and we have to have a certain amount of volume to know what's going on. And that it's differentiated by place. So the solution for one, there is no national best answer to this. There is a paradigm for understanding it that is differentiated by place and powered on an ongoing basis by information. And so just to take you back to one of those snapshots I showed you, the idea is that we want to augment our reality. We want to go from this today, where we look out across these buildings and there are critical pieces of information which I can't know. The market cannot efficiently address these pieces, the environmental performance, the economic performance, the energy performance of these buildings because I have no transparency about those aspects. What green building does is a process of collecting information on those attributes, making it transparent so that the market can efficiently value those resources. And that's the this is the future that we're going toward. What are we going to do with that information? And here's one vision for you. And I'll operationalize the vision in a second. The idea is that it's very common to have essentially a project under investigation, a proposed project, a new project, or an existing project. I'm asking, how does it fit in? As I've indicated to you, one of our 13 currently operational metrics is the idea of what is a project doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And if I can evaluate that on a scale between 0, I'm not doing anything, and 100%, which is I'm doing all of the strategies weighted by their importance that are addressing greenhouse gas emissions that we recognize in rating systems. It's not the totality of strategies in the universe, for sure. It's the ones we recognize. But that's but from a decision maker's perspective, bounding the conversation and saying, we recognize these 50 things, of which 25 of them relate to greenhouse gas emissions, of which they differ in their relative importance, and I can turn that into an index. Okay, it starts with the ability to score a prospective or an existing project on an index. That's useful, but it's not enough. The next thing I need to do is I need to use information about the marketplace. I got to find that curve and say, where does that proposed project fit in? If I know where the project fits in, I can now evaluate this. I know 2 things from this graph. I know how much of what you could have done did you do, and what did everyone else do. That gives me some notion of feasibility. There's some implicit issues of cost in here. And so if I'm a decision maker and I'm being offered this project, do I accept this project? The answer is no, not me, not as a decision maker. I'm not going to take a below average project on a dimension for which my agency or organization has a mandate to improve. And so by exposing that this is a below average project, I give myself leverage to have a conversation demanding a revised project. And in a sense, this is simply the Lake Wobegon effect. I'm demanding that every project be above average, and I'm providing transparency about what that means, and I'm working across a dimension that relates to a policy and organizational objective. So I started with the proposed project, I went to a revised project, and then using my information technology, in near real time, I updated that distribution and effectively raised the bar. So I'm doing that in near real time, and as I pile on with my Lake Wobegon effect, more and more kids being above average, I move that distribution and I keep moving it. I'm not going to, the basis for this transformation is having a clear performance outcome, understanding the prevalence of practice, and having sufficient information systems to characterize a project and have a framework for demanding higher performance. That's what we're talking about in terms of operationalizing that curve we started with. And so I'm going to show you some screenshots from a tool that we call the Green Building Information Gateway. And I encourage you to go to the website and try it live yourself. You can, of course, you can go out there right now while I'm talking at you and play with it. If we have time, I can do some live demo, but I think you'll get the idea from the screenshot. So the idea, when you go to GBIG.org, Green Building Information Gateway, you'll find a pilot resource with information available for the District of Columbia, Virginia, Maryland, Illinois, and soon the rest of the country. Actually, I'll show you how to get the rest of the country right away if you're anxious. But the idea is, what we start with is a map-centric view. Because in some ways, as we know, real estate is a location-specific phenomenon. And we have the great fortune that the thing we're trying to transform is made of concrete and steel and wood and sticking out of the ground. And so we use the map as an organizing paradigm. And critically, the first thing we do is provide the kind of transparency that we've always wanted to provide. If any of you have heard our CEO, Rick Pedrucci, talk about this, he holds up a box of animal crackers and he shows the nutrition label on the side and says, this is the kind of information we want to provide. Okay, for the buildings on this map, this is that information. And so when we, at an aggregated level, we have some information about the site design, the water efficiency, the energy aspects, the materials, the indoor environmental quality, and a synthetic measure, this GHG or carbon index. And so this kind of transparency, just keeping in mind that each of these individual little icons, sustainable sites, water, is based in turn between 5 and 15 different